Okay, so just to summarize our journey so far, we have been looking into supervised classification learning in the last few classes. Uh, we saw what is supervised machine learning. We saw one of the categories of supervised machine learning is classification and the other is regression. Classification is the idea where we are trying to predict categorical features. That is, or we are trying to, our labeled data or the target value is categorical in nature. That is, it has a fixed number of defined values in which we are trying to predict what is the value based, what is the class based on the different features we have. And we saw several different algorithms like KNN, decision trees, random forest, naive Bayes that help us to do this. Now, we also saw how to implement them. We also saw how we can use scikit-learn's methods in implementing classification algorithms. Additionally, we saw how to do cross-validation, how to fine-tune it, and we saw certain examples that will help us to understand how we use classification in different scenarios. The next step in our journey is moving towards something called as regression, and that is the agenda for this class. I'll be introducing what regression is, the maths behind it, and get an idea of uh, how we can implement it, and let's see how it goes. Okay, so that's the code for today. Before going ahead, do you have any questions in regards to anything that we have done in classification or the examples that we have done, or just yeah, maybe even about regression? Okay, in that case, let me go ahead. Okay, so when we talk about regression, the main idea is we are looking for, or at least at this point, we are looking for features that will be able to predict and a continuous variable. Okay. We are looking for features that will be able to predict a continuous variable. So one idea here is we use something called as linear regression. And in linear regression, we say that there is a linear relationship of two or more variables within a data set. Okay. So let me directly start with the hypothesis. Let's say we have our features of the data set as x1, x2, x3 till xd, which represent the different dimensions of the data that we have. Okay. So for our case, let's say if this was a Titanic problem, then this would be our age, this would be our gender, this would be our fare, and so on. So different dimensions of the data. Okay. And we say that these different dimensions of the data, they contribute in different ways. So we have parameters like theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, theta d, which are weights that get multiplied with the feature value. So weights that get multiplied with the feature value, so that we add all of this up to get a weighted sum, and that is the answer that we have. Okay. So we take different weights, multiply it with different features, and add all of these values up so that we get a prediction. Okay. The prediction is our vibrant. So if this is uh, a continuous problem, then our answer y hat is, we say, what will match up with the label of the data. Okay, so let me give you a better example that links with regression. Is, let's consider we're talking about house prices, and let's say we have multiple features, like, let's say x1 is the uh, square feet area of the house, x2 is, let's say, number of rooms, and let's say x3 is let's say x3 is again categorical, like if the house is an apartment, or if it is uh, a villa, and things like that, etc. Okay, so these features x1, x2, x3, they sum up, or they add up, or they multiply with certain other values like theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, that tell how much importance is the value of these features. Okay, and what they predict from what they predict is the value y, which is the sale price. Okay, so what we have done is we have gone to the market, and we have collected lots and lots of data, uh, which says in the past when we have sold a house, based on these features, what is the value. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to predict a value y hat based on the information that we have about the different houses. Okay? And now we are trying to map a certain hypothesis which says that, okay, if I have these features, I'm trying to learn these weights that will help me to predict the value y hat, which I want to take as close as possible to the sale price. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, okay, great. So within this journey, we also add something called as theta zero, which is the bias price, okay, or which is the base price of the house. So you say, okay, based on all of the data we have, irrespective of the square feet area, or the number of rooms, or the apartment or villa, if I just take the average of all of the prices, okay, and I say, okay, let's say I have uh, you take the average of all of the prices. It says irrespective of either of the features, this should be the price of the house. Okay, so if I have 1,000 examples ranging from maybe $5,000 to $20,000, I can say, okay, the average comes to around $10,000, which tells me that, okay, this is the base price of the house. Okay, so irrespective of the features, I'll say, if I don't know anything about the data, I will say, let me sell the house at $10,000, and then as I add more and more information to the data, my value will become more refined or more accurate towards the actual sale price. So that is what this theta zero term represents. Okay, the bias price. The the interesting thing with this kind of a hypothesis is the output that you get is now not limited to a certain categories. Okay, the output that you get is more generic in nature. That is, it can give you an output within a range of values which is continuous. Okay, by very small changes in x1, x2, or xd, the value of this output will change or will modify so that it is not following categorical data. My class is not necessarily categorical, it can be any value. Okay. So this is just the base hypothesis of regression, and this specifically is linear regression. Can you guess why this is called linear regression?
Because output will be continuous.
Okay, the output will be continuous. So actually the term regression reflects that the output is continuous. What does the term linear
It will be straight line.
yes, great. So this will be a straight line. Okay. So if you look at this equation, this is the equation of a straight line, right? So maybe you may be familiar with this part. We say if this is C and this is mx. Okay. Then this is the standard form of a straight line that we have seen. Y is equal to mx plus c. Now, just by adding different dimensions, we are adding. You can imagine that instead of a line, if I take this equation, then we're talking in a three-dimensional space. I'm talking about a plane. If I take additional dimensions, then I'm talking about, we're talking about hyper, or what say, multi-dimensional planes. But all those multi-dimensional planes are linear in relationship. So when I say linear in relationship, what I mean is it will always be a straight line. Okay, it will not follow a curve or something like that. Okay. And we have to deal with that in other parts of the data, and we have to see that if the regression fails, that is, it is not my data is not linearly related, or they are non-linearly related, then my linear regression would fail, and I would want to go to something more advanced. Okay. But at this point, this is called linear regression because we are representing a straight line, or we are representing linear relationship. You see, these are different features and they are related with each other linearly. Why? Because multiplying with a constant and then adding them together makes a linear relationship. A non-linear relationship would look something like this. If I have terms like x1 square and some theta, maybe d plus 1, or if I have terms like x1, x2 and theta d plus 2, then this becomes non-linear equations. Why? Because I'm combining the features in a non-linear fashion. Does that make sense? So there will be some cases that we may have to do that. But at this moment, we are just focusing on the linear relationship. Thus, it is called linear regression. Now, we can also take this term and we can represent it in the summation format here. So where we say that each term is theta j xj, and our j goes from 0 to d. Okay, and that also is a representation of this thing. So can you tell me, to be able to take this equation and represent it in this format, I need to specify one more idea, and I have to specify one more assumption. Can you tell me what that assumption is?
Only one x. No, not that one.
So very simple. Okay, I'm just taking this equation, and to represent this equation in this format, I have to take one assumption. What can that assumption be? Okay, maybe before going that, I'm just confirming everyone understands what this notation means, right?
Yes, summation.
Okay, so this is summation, which goes from j is equal to 0 to d, where we say theta j and xj are the different parameters. This j will take different values, 0 to d, that will replace inside, and they are linked with summation. So maybe let me expand a few terms. This would look like this: theta 0 x0 plus theta 1 x1 plus theta d xt. Okay. Now I have made the answer even more obvious. Can you tell me what is the assumption?
x0 is always 1.
Yes, excellent. So to be able to take this equation and write it in this format, I have to write an additional term saying that this variable x0 will always be equal to 1. Okay. Only then I can take this notation and write it in this summation format. Okay, make sense? Can you tell me what does this signify? X0 is equal to 1.
And I just one doubt. Even if x0 is some term, mx can be a slope, right? But it will start from 0, 0, that point.
Correct. You are
what's
right.
the issue with that?
What's the?
What will be the issue if there is an x0?
There is no issue. It is an advantage. So if I remove the x0 term and I say that my linear equation is only this part, then I'm ensuring that any line that I create will go from the origin. Okay.
Yeah.
But there may be cases where your line may not start from the origin. It may start from a different value. So let me consider an example. Let's say I have house prices here. I have house prices here, sale price, and I have got area here, and I have data only for these points. Okay, so I have data from here, here, and so on. It may be so that, okay, even though they are linearly related, it may be so that there will be a base price of a house. Okay, at least registration amount, or at least you may not find a house with 0 area and 0 sales. Okay, so when you want to make a line through these features, if you don't have a theta 0 term, then you are forced by going with only lines here. Okay, which is which is not suitable for many examples. Okay, so learning one more term theta 0 allows you the flexibility to take this line and start it at any intercept. Okay, maybe positive, maybe negative for some cases, but it allows you to start it at any intercept. Does that make sense? Okay. Otherwise, you are always forced to create a line which starts from the origin. Maybe your data does not fit that. In most cases, we'll see that most of our data will have some base value, and that is what your theta 0 term tries to represent. So for this to happen, you have to ensure that your x0 term is 1. So you see, what we are doing is, by adding this term x0, we are adding an additional feature. These are all the base features that my data has, x1 to xd, but now we are adding an additional feature x0, which has a value of always 1. And this term theta 0 is always called the bias term. Bias is whatever line you make, how much of value shifted from positive or negative. Okay, so that decides your y-intercept. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's go ahead. So we have a concise form of representing this, and this is very interesting. And there is a purpose why we are doing it in this fashion, specifically related to how we will be calculating this hypothesis. Okay, so this hypothesis is also denoted by something like this. We denote it as h theta of x. So we say that this is a function h which takes the input x and it is parameterized by the variable theta. Okay, so again, this kind of notation is also very interesting. So actually, this is the notation that I'm using here as well, h theta of x, okay, which is the hypothesis equation. Further, we saw within classification examples that once we have our hypothesis, we need some way of knowing how good or how bad we are doing. Okay, we have to evaluate our model. Okay, so for classification, we used evaluation methods like accuracy, precision, recall, F1 score, F beta score, and so on, to find out how good or how bad we are doing. With regression, generally, we look for error terms, and we look for how our error terms are summed throughout all the data points, so that we get a sense of how good or how bad is our model. Okay. So let me take this example. So in this case, I have a feature here on the x-axis, and this is the value that we are trying to predict. Okay, so this is x and this is y, and these dots, these circles here are the actual data points. Okay. These circles here are the actual data point, and for these data points, what we have tried to do is we are saying, okay, if I try to fit this to a line, then I get this point. Okay, and this is the hypothesis that we have learned. Okay, so using some machine learning method, we don't know how we are going to do that, but let's say we have learned that this is the line that is fitting the data. So we need to find out, is this okay? So let's say we need to find out, if I have that line and I have this line, which one is a better line? Okay, so visually we can see which one fits closer to the data. Okay, but we need an empirical method, a mathematical method, to qualitatively identify how good or how bad is our prediction. Okay. So we use the error term, and what we can do is, okay, let me take this line and I say, this is my data point. I say, how far is my data from the actual value? So this is the actual value, the circle is the actual value, and the line is what we are predicting. What is the difference between these two guys? Okay, so this is one error. This is error, 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 error. So if I add all of these error terms, I should get some sense of how good or how bad my model is. Does that make sense? Now, if I simply add it, okay, if I don't do any operation, I simply add it, it may happen that sometimes in this case, my model is predicting lower, much lower than the data. In this case, my model is predicting much higher from the data. If I simply add, these terms will get cancelled out, and I will not truly know how good or how bad my model is. So I am interested in the square of errors. So what we do is, we take each of these error points. So this is what I'm showing here, each of these error points. We square all of these errors, so that either positive error or negative error, we have a sense of how bad we are or how far we are from the actual value. Okay, and then we add all of these terms up. Okay. If you have to name this method, what would you name it?
Sum of squares.
Sum of.
Squares of error.
Okay, excellent. That is the right answer. So it's called SSE, which is sum of square of errors, which is what we're doing. We have taken each errors, we have squared it, and we have summed it up. So we have sum of square of errors. Similar to SSE, we also have methods like MSE. Can you guess what MSE could mean?
Mean square error.
Excellent. And then we have something called as RMSE. Can you guess this one also?
Root mean.
Excellent. So exactly. Okay. So we have sum of square errors. So this sum of square errors will be a big number. Why? Because it has added all the errors for each of the points. But we would want to know a sense of what is the mean error, what is the mean squared error. Okay. So you take this entire term and you've divided by the number of data points we have. Okay. You take this entire term and we have, let's say, 20 data points. You divide it by 20, you will get mean squared error. And you take its square root, you will get root mean square error. So this will be more closer to the actual error of our prediction and the data that we have. Okay. So generally, these are the methods that people use. If you look at this cost function, which is basically trying to take this value, this data, and trying to represent it into an equation format. Can you tell me what is this? Is this mean square error, root mean square error, or sum of square errors?
MSE.
Okay, excellent. But do you see a problem with MSE?
2.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. So this is exactly what MSE is, but we have an additional term or additional division by 2. And yes, that is the idea. I'll maybe talk about this too a bit later. And it's interesting why we have kept this 2 and what is the purpose. So the idea is this is our prediction. That is, we say if I give the value x inside, to this hypothesis, based on the parameters, we will predict a value, which is our y hat. We will compare how good or how bad this y hat is doing with the actual label of the data. So that will be our error. We will square it up so that either positive or negative, we say error is an error. Whether we are over predicting or we are under predicting, we want to give it equal importance. So we square it up, we sum it up for all the data points. How many data points? N. So our data point goes from 1 to n. That is why we have this superscript I and superscript I here. So this says for the ith data point, this is my input, this is my output, and then I add it for all the data points. That is what gives us the sum for all. You divide it by 1 by n so that you get mean of sum of squared errors. That is MSE. And you take an additional half. So will this additional half change anything about my values of theta that we are trying to learn? No, right? So whether I try to minimize the actual cost or I minimize the half of this cost, my my final answers of theta will not change because of this half. So this half is doing something else. And we will talk about this when we look into gradient descent and what gradient descent is doing. Okay. So this equation, we term it as J of theta, which is cost of the model. Okay. So you see, within this equation, the parameter is x, or sorry, theta is the parameter, x is the input. Whereas for this equation, theta is the input. Okay. So we want to find out, if I give different values of theta, what is this cost that I will be incurring? Okay. And so that our model fits best, so that we have a line that fits best this one and this one, my idea or the agenda would be find the values of theta or minimize the values of theta that gives us the best fit, that gives us the least cost. Okay. So if I have to take the cost between this line and this line, I know that this line will have a higher J value compared to this line. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So let us further go and try to get some intuition for how is h theta of x and how is j theta related to each other. Okay, so let's say that this is our data points. We have a feature x, we have a value y. Maybe I can note it down. So I have some x and I have some y, and these are the different data points that we know to be true. Okay, and let's say that they are at the values 1, 2, and 3 on the x-axis, and 1, 2, and 3 on the y-axis. Okay, and so to represent this model with x as having just one dimension, how many parameters do I need?
Two.
Okay, I will need 2 parameters. That is, my h theta has 2 parameters, theta 0 and theta 1. Okay, so let's say in the first case we try to predict this line is our model. To make this line, can you tell me the value of theta 0 and theta 1? What should be the value of, okay, theta 0 should be
0,
and theta 1 should be
1.
okay, excellent. So this is the line that I can fit with theta 0 and theta 1. So theta 0 as 0 ensures that we are going from the origin, and theta 1 is equal to 1 ensures that if I go 1 unit in x, I get 1 unit in y, 2 units in x, I get 2 units in y, and so on. Can you also say what is the cost for this system? Sorry. What would be the cost for this hypothesis?
No idea.
Okay. So let's say here I'm also trying to plot the cost, and on the x-axis I have theta. On the x-axis I have theta 1. Okay. So cost is basically what? Cost is our prediction minus the actual value and the square and sum of all these cases. So our prediction for the first data point. So for I, this will translate to 3 points, right? I will go from 1 to 3 because we have only 3 data points. So when you take the first data point and you fit into our model will get an answer of 1. The actual value is also 1. So 1 minus 1 is 0 squared. That is the first data point. Plus 2 minus 2, 0. And 3 minus 3, 0. Okay. So for all the 3 data points, our prediction and the actual value are exactly the same. So our cost becomes 0. Okay. So if I look at my data, I can say that this will be my point. So here I'm plotting the hypothesis. Here I'm plotting the cost, and I'm just plotting it.
Why when it is in one position in x-axis?
Why?
You marked that cost in x-axis.
Okay. Oh yes. So because on the x-axis I'm putting theta 1. See, theta 1 we estimated that this is our model where theta 1 is having the value of 1. For theta 1 as 1, my cost becomes 0. That is what I'm trying to plot here.
Yeah.
So let us now take a different line. Let's say that we are going for this line, and for this line, what is happening is it is going from the x-axis at the origin, and here when I go 1 unit in x, I reach 0.5. When I reach 2 units in x, I reach 1. 3 units in x, I reach 1.5. Okay, so that is my model. Can you tell me for this model what is theta 0 and what is theta 1?
Theta 1 is 0.5.
Okay, theta 1 will be 0.5. Excellent. Theta 1 will be 0.5. So our predictions here will be, and our errors here actually will be this much distance, right? For each of these cases. In the first case, our error is 0.5. Second case, our error is 1. Third case, our error is 1.5. Okay, so our actual if you take the square and sum and mean, then we would have a positive value of error, right? So if I go and say, if I plot this error on this other plot here, I can say that when theta 1 is 0.5, that is somewhere around here, I get some error. Okay. Now, of course, we can go and evaluate this. I don't want to do that, but we will have a positive value of error, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Instead of this value of line, had we another line like this, where I say, maybe here. Okay, let me go for this line, where we are going for when x is 1, my y gives a value of 2. When x is 2, my y gives a value of 4, and so on. I think this is too big of a line. Let me go for a different line, sorry. Where okay, 1.5. This is a line. When x is 1, we give 1.5. When x is 2, we get 3. And when x is 3, we get okay.
4.5.
Yeah, 1.5. 4.5. Yes. The agenda is I'm just going for the opposite of this. That is the error that we had here. I'm just taking a line that gives me the other error here. For that, my theta 1 is 1.5. And our errors would again go to this much, which we have 0.5, 1, and 1.5. Basically saying that when theta 1 is 1.5 here, I have this error. Okay. If I go with theta 1 as 2, somewhere around here, I will get a much bigger error. Does that make sense? So
Yep.
as I go on both directions of theta, so this would be my minimum value. If I move in this direction or in this direction, my error will increase. So if I try to join these lines, it would look like this. Okay. In fact, this is a very bad example. What I wanted to show more clearly, maybe. So since you've got the idea, let me draw this line exactly how I want it. I want something like this. So I was just demonstrating that we would end up with something like this, with 1, 0, and then 2, 3, and so on. Okay. So we see that as we change the value of theta, so in this case, as we change the value of theta 1, our cost increases on both ends like a parabolic equation. Okay. And the final value that we are interested to find out is the value that gives us the minimum point of this parabolic equation. Okay. Does it make sense? Okay, great. Can you tell me how can we find the minimum point of this parabolic equation?
Closer to x.
What did he say?
Which is closer to x will be the minimum value, right?
Okay, closer to this, closer to this x-axis, that will be the minimum point. But how do we find it?
Equation you are asking?
Okay, do we have an equation?
I have zero idea. That is what I was about to say.
Okay. Yeah. But how can we find, any idea how can we find the minimum of a curve? If we have a curve, this is basically a minimum problem, right? I have a curve. I need to find the minima of this curve.
Yeah.
And I know the equation of this curve. Do you remember some parts of the calculus class?
Trying to remember, but nothing is coming up.
Okay. What about you, Srinivas, Svecha? Okay. Okay. So the idea is, if I want to find the minimum of a curve, I can differentiate this with respect to theta, equate that to 0, solve for that, and the value of theta that gives me j theta is 0. The value of theta that gives me derivative of j theta is 0, is the value that will minimize this curve. Okay? We may have done this, right? If I
Yes,
have an equation, what is the minima? So we find the extreme points, then we do double differentiation and find out which is the maxima, which is the minima, and so on. So the same concept lies here. The only difference is I cannot do d by d theta. I can do d by d theta if my model has only one dimension. So in this case, I am not searching for theta 0. I know, let's say I know the value of theta 0. If I only search for value of theta 1, then I can directly do differentiation, single differentiation. But when I have multiple dimensions, so h of theta, if it has theta 0, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, then I have to do something called as partial derivatives. Okay. And do you know what is the difference between this and this?
Yeah. One is partial differentiation. Other term we will keep it like that itself.
Okay, great. Do you know what this is called when I do it for multiple dimensions?
Dot theta by dot. That is what. Apart from that, no.
When I do it for multiple dimensions, this is shown by this term.
Delta.
Okay, which is the
Del, something like that.
which is the gradient of the model. Okay, so this would probably we have seen this, right? Gradient and okay, I forgot the other term, but I remember gradient at least. So gradient is basically partial derivatives at different direction. That gives me the direction in which I will increase or reduce this value of j. Okay. So let me go one step further. So we saw this for a single dimension. This would look like this. But when I have a multiple dimension case, so let's say I have something like this, what we will get is you will get okay, I'm trying to draw a surface, but I'm not sure if that is visible. So just imagine that this is a cone, and this cone has concentric circles where this is the minimum. So just imagine a bed sheet, and which is extended on 4 ends, and we put a ball, and the shape that the bed sheet makes is the shape that I'm trying to draw here, where on one axis here I have, let's say, theta 0, and on this axis I have theta 1, that is this axis I have theta 1, and this axis here is the value of y. Okay. And we see that as we change theta 0 and theta 1, what we are plotting is j of theta. J of theta takes different values. Okay, so there are some combinations of theta 0, theta 1. Let's say the combinations on this top circle, which says that, okay, if I take any value of theta 0 or theta 1, that give me different points here, my j value remains constant. That is, throughout these different values of theta 0, theta 1, my y-axis value that I come across is the same. That is, when I change theta 0 and theta 1 within this space, my cost remains same. But I have different costs. So let's say if I come to this circle here, I can change the values of theta 0 and theta 1 so that my cost now becomes lesser than the previous value. Okay. Now there are many values of theta 0 and theta 1 that can give me the same cost. In fact, all the different points on the circle are different operating points of theta 0 and theta 1. That gives me the cost, this value, and so on. So our agenda here is to be able to find out what is this one value of theta 0 and theta 1. What is this one value of theta 0 and theta 1 that gives me the minimum cost. Okay, that minimum cost may be 0 or it may not be 0. Okay, depending upon how good of my data is. Okay. So can I create a line that goes through each and every point of my data, and only then, only in that case, I can get a j of 0. But there may be cases where my data is like this. Okay, let's say this green is my actual data. In that case, I can never create a line that goes through all data points. Okay, at least in this dimension. So I have to make a compromise. So I have to go either between them, either go through two of them. Okay, and depending upon which line is better, how will we know? We'll just evaluate the cost for each of these lines. And whichever line gives us the better cost, the least cost, is the line that we will choose for our model. And we know for sure that since they will not pass from the origin, then they will not have 0 error. Okay, there will be some base error, which again does not change our problem. We are again trying to find this minimum value, just that this minimum value does not end up to be at 0. It ends up to be at a different point rather than 0. So whether we talk about one dimension, this is talking about 2 dimensions. And sadly, after this point, we cannot visualize. As soon as you go to 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, this curve becomes a multi-dimensional curve, which is difficult for us to visualize. But I hope you get the point on what I'm trying to demonstrate here, right? Okay. The next agenda then is to be able to find out how do I come to this value where I find the right value of theta 0 and theta 1 that will be able to fetch me this curve. Okay. So there are 2 approaches to do something like that. One is called as a fixed form solution. And then other is called as an iterative solution. A fixed form solution is basically that tells me, I write a formula, and to that formula, I put all of this data, and that formula gives me the final answer. Okay, simple. I write a formula, put the values into this formula that gives me the final answer. That is the fixed form solution. An iterative solution says is, I will make an initial guess. Okay, I make an initial guess somewhere here, and then slowly I will try to improve that guess by moving into some directions. Okay, and when I stop moving, that is, I am oscillating around this point, that is where I will stop, and that is an iterative solution. Okay,
so this iterative method you explain, is it some kind of that PSO, particle sum optimization, or something like that? In random direction we move.
Yes, so it can be that way, but the primary way that people use iterative methods within data science is we use a term called as gradient descent.
Okay.
So, of course, we can use other methods also, like PSO, GA, and you see all of those methods are also AI methods of finding solutions to problems. Okay, just that it happens that those methods maybe are more costlier than gradient descent, and somehow within the data science community, gradient descent method has received much more popularity, fame compared to other methods.
Okay.
So nonetheless, either ways, the strategy is same. In iterative method, you come with a random guess, and then slowly you would want to improve that random guess. And in this case, how do we know one guess is better than the other guess? Look at the cost. If the cost is reducing for the next step, we know that this step is better than the other step. So an example of maybe a fixed form solution is, if I tell you what are the roots of a quadratic equation, you can tell me that, okay, the value of alpha or beta, the roots of the quadratic equation, is minus b plus or minus root over b square minus 4ac by 2a. Okay? And we know for a quadratic equation, we don't need an iterative solution. Why? Because we know the fixed form solution. We know that irrespective of what a, b, or c you throw at me, the solutions will lie at these values. Okay. So in such situations, you would say that, why should I go for an iterative method, right? I have a fixed form solution. Does that make sense? Now, the need for an iterative solution comes when we don't have an equation like this. That is, if I tell you what are the roots of a cubic equation, then we are stuck because we don't have a solution. We don't have a fixed form solution for a cubic equation. In fact, some years back, I had seen a paper, but I think those paper, they take certain assumptions, and only under those assumptions can you find the fixed form solution of a cubic equation. But generally, we don't have a fixed form solution of a cubic equation. Or as we go higher, a 4th power equation, 5 power equation, 6 power equation, then we lose control. We don't have a fixed form solution. In those cases, we are left with iterative methods alone. So then you would see people use something like Newton-Raphson and things like that to find out what is the intersection of that equation with the x-axis. Okay, and that gives us iterative methods to solve it. Okay? So that is one reason to go for iterative methods. That is when the problem is so complicated that finding that we don't have an equation that can give us the answer. In those cases, if we use an iterative method, we can find the solution. There is one more reason why someone, even though when there is a fixed form equation, people would not want to use the fixed form equation and then go for an iterative method like this. Okay. The reason is that even though I have the answer, evaluating this answer takes a lot of time. Okay. Evaluating this fixed form answer takes a lot of time. So in this case, this idea is not very clear. But when I go for data analysis and when I go for finding the fixed form solution of data analysis, when my data points reaches millions and millions of data points, then the fixed form solution has matrix inverse and matrix multiplications for this kind of problems. Okay, to get the linear regression answer, of different thetas, theta 1, theta 2, and so on, the fixed form solution has inverse of matrices. Okay, and when evaluating inverse of matrices becomes very, very complicated when you go to more and more number of data points. So when you go to higher values of data points, finding inverse is very complex. And even though we have a fixed form solution, it is cheaper to go for an iterative solution, cheaper in terms of time and in terms of hardware requirements. Okay, so the time it takes to evaluate an iterative method and the time and the space it takes to evaluate an iterative method becomes much lesser than evaluating the fixed form method. And that is a very true possibility, especially in data analytics, when we come across cases where we have millions of data points. And that is another reason that even though we have a fixed form solution, people would want to go for an iterative solution. Okay, so I hope I have convinced you of which is the superior method. So the superior method actually depends upon the case that we're going for. Okay, if we have a very simple solution and for that solution we have the answer, then it makes sense that I use the solution directly. Okay, I need not go to an iterative solution or I need not even go to machine learning to solve that answer. So machine learning only makes sense when the problem is complicated or is infeasible to calculate using nominal means or nominal methods. Okay. In those cases, we'll go for machine learning solutions. Okay. Is it fine so far? Okay, excellent. So maybe for this class we can stop it here, and for the next class, my agenda would be to introduce to you what is gradient descent and how does gradient descent work and how it helps us to find these values of theta zeros and theta ones. Okay. If you have any other questions, we can discuss, or we may end for now.
I'm good.
Okay. Did you guys get a chance to look at the human activity recognition problem?
Almost finished Titanic dataset.
Oh,
Tomorrow I'll start the other one. Sorry.
okay, that's okay. Do you have any other questions on Titanic dataset?
No. It was good.
Okay. Once you finish, try updating your result on Kaggle and try to see maybe what rank do you get with the global community. Okay.
Yep.
And then maybe what we can try to do as just an exercise is as a group we may try to increase our ranking and see what is the best performance we can do with global. Okay. That would be an interesting exercise. In that case, if you have no other questions, we'll stop for today. We'll meet back on Friday.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye-bye.